Go. Okay, but just to let everyone know, this webinar is going to be recorded. However, because we are going to be making a lot of space for actual discussion and us to engage with one another, we will be providing small breakout rooms so that we can have that sort of more anonymous sort of conversations, but then we'll come back and have a sort of reflection period that is going to be recorded. So just putting that out there, just to make it more comfortable and more authentic when we are having these deep discussions, especially we're going to be having lots of discussion about oppression and youth experience as well. But just to introduce the webinar, this is the first session, which is Youth Identity and Advocacy. I want to put it out there too that throughout this webinar series, really it's intended to begin the conversation. However, what we are going to be doing is providing like language and concepts, things for us to really utilize in our practice when we're engaging with young people and creating spaces for youth. However, we did want to make sure that everything that we are talking about, we want it to be tangible and we want to be able to provide actual resources that you can use in your space and take from. So at the end of every session, we'll be sure to send out an email with all of those resources, whether it is sort of reading materials, things that we pulled information from, and activities. But other than that, beyond this learning part, right? I think the biggest outcome that we also wanted was really to build a sense of community because we are all working with youth. We want to let you all know that you are not alone in that process. We can reach out to one another, really build that discourse and that discussion among all of us because we are all working in many different communities. However, what we're trying to build, and this is going to come up a lot, is that collective power, right? So really sharing that those strategies together and those diverse experiences so that we can, again, have that collective power and have those positive outcomes to really have that good, strong community connection and relationships. Okay, so I will go ahead and begin. All right, so just to provide all of the acknowledgements, this whole series, I could not, we could not have done it. This is, California Youth Advocacy Network. We are hosting it. However, throughout this process, it was fully in collaboration with Tribal Community Coordinating Center, Ravina Soto, want to give shout outs to her, and also the LGBTQ Center of Orange County, which with Kale. So want to give them both shout outs, and also my name is Ignacio Burgos. I did not introduce myself yet, but yes, so just yeah, in the modeling of collaboration and working across different communities as well. This was that process, and just want to say thank you. Okay, so to begin, we, instead of me really presenting to you and telling you, lecturing to you what the definition of advocacy is, what I like to do is really build on a collective definition. So really find out what you all feel, what you all think through your experiences, because we're going to be getting into this. Advocacy means something different to everyone, and it looks different to everyone. So if you could take a moment to reflect on this, right? What is advocacy and what does it look like to you? So you could feel free to annotate on the screen. Would love that. Or if you feel more comfortable, feel free to put it in the chat. And we're going to be looking through the chat to really pull together sort of all of your answers so we can come up with that collective definition. And just to, oh, thank you. And if anyone has not annotated before, if you go down to your options on your Zoom screen, it'll be an option down there on the bottom. Kind of, my screen's gonna look a little different, but right next to like the share, well, I guess it would be next to chat. To the right would be annotate, or you can push the more option and you should be able to see annotate there. And from there, you'll be able to plug in either drawings or your words that you would like to share. All right, so Thank you. I see from Paul Tobacco program. I'm guessing Mona. Speaking up. Then we have yes, intentional action to improve your community. Okay, and I see with the idea, okay, so speaking up with the idea of creating impactful change, collaboration and network, standing up and supporting the needs of those we are advocating for. All right, so I see like keywords, creation of impact, collaboration, networking, standing up or speaking up. I see raising awareness on behalf of others, which is, I think, a very important aspect as well. Researching and reporting. Thank you for putting that out there, right? Because a lot of times we cannot begin some of that advocacy work until we really do that research work or the collecting of information. Actions to make positive change, taking action to create a change. So change is at the center of that as well. That's the outcome that we want, it sounds like. And then grassroots mobilization, thank you also. And if anyone is not familiar with what grassroots like organizing is, that's really where we are pulling all of the resources from the community, from the ground up versus from the top down, from the systems and sort of our legislators. We're going to community members, community leaders. And we say speaking up and taking action to make a change or support a cause. Okay. Right, perfect. Thank you. So again, it seems like altogether there's a lot of different definitions. Okay. Now, kind of to go a little deeper, right? Because we talked about the a practice of raising awareness, of speaking out, of doing that research to find out more about our community, networking, collaborating with our community, getting our community together to really create change. When is advocacy needed? Because that's a very important question as well. When do we feel that advocacy needs to be utilized and it needs to be brought into the space? And I'll go ahead and actually I'll leave up our answers right now. Yeah. Ooh, thank you, Charlie. All right, so Charlie Quinn said when inequities exist, right? So when there's some sort of unequal power dynamic. Anything else? Any other times where we feel advocacy is needed? All right. So when people and groups and their issues are being ignored, yes, or overlooked or treated poorly, when the voices aren't being heard. Right. When things could be better. Yeah. And that's I like that answer too. And it is a broad answer as well, but it's also kind of specific. But what I mean by broad is when things could be better, as in what does that mean for each different community, each different person that is experiencing something that they feel that something could be better in my environment. To address social inequities, yep, we got inequities again, discrimination and violation of human rights. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to give one more minute just in case there's anyone that's in the middle of typing, making sure to leave space for everyone to be able to contribute and participate in this discussion. Okay. Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and move forward. Okay. So, yes, all of what we've been saying. Actually, let me clear the comments real quick. Sorry about that. Dun, dun, dun. There we go. Okay. All of our answers really circle around the idea of when it's needed. It's when there are Kale. All right. Um, Kale was having some technical difficulties, but we have our other co-facilitator. Would you like to speak on this? Do you want me to go forward?
I can speak on this.
Oh, and I love your face paint. Yay!
Thank you. Yeah, I was having some issues, but I'm here. Hello, good morning, everyone. Happy Halloween. And I hope everyone's having a terrific Tuesday. So advocacy and its purpose. Why do we do it? So we do it for them. So this is a picture of this is a collection of pictures for those who are a part of the SUP coalition that I work with. And we're trying to get OC Pride to be smoke free, but we do it for them. We provide them a space to even promote their work, which is that top picture of like the art exhibit that some of the members had submitted to, and then we allow them the opportunity to connect with the community. We allow them the opportunity to walk in the Pride Parade and be included and then be heard and be seen, and that's why we do what we do, right? And so, advocacy and its purpose and understanding that just knowing that we do it for them.
Thank you, Kale. And yes, that's exactly reflective too of everyone, what the answers you were really talking about when you're talking about communities that are not being represented, where the voice is not being heard. So really creating space for that those voices to be heard and be able to create the change that the communities that we're working with, the change that they envision, right? And it's working with these communities as well. Right. But the thing I also really want to point out is that as we all heard from our collective voice, that that process of creating change is complex. It really changes depending on the community we're working with, the needs of different communities, the experiences that they're having. When we're talking about the oppression they're experiencing, the inequities that they're going through, the human rights, right, that is impacting them, or the lack of human rights that they are able to access. Okay. And that's something that is, complexity is not a bad thing. That is wonderful, because when we are going through that complex process of change, it means that we are actually listening to our community. We're doing that process of research. We're checking in on a regular basis. And that is a very important thing to remember. And I will always say and advocate that anytime that we are looking at solutions, or people are telling you, oh, it's easy, so easy to fix, it's this community that's the problem, it's that one thing that is the issue, I guarantee you they are wrong and they're not looking at the whole picture. Okay. So really at the base though as well, and we talked about this, the need for advocacy when there are communities that are not being represented, right? And that is oppression. But the thing that we really need to pay attention to and understand is that a lot of times when we're talking about those easy solutions, it's because we're only looking at the outcome of an issue, something that could be stemming from long histories, many different instances, okay, that have been existing for years and years, that are happening structurally from the laws that we create, the different isms that exist, right? So when we're talking about racism, sexism, heterosexism, all of these isms that exist in our society that really inform the way that people operate, the way we treat one another, and that gets funneled into our laws that we create that impact people in our environment, right? And then also needing to understand the whole history of white supremacy culture and colonization and everything under that window. But again, all of those inequities and those disparities that we see are an outcome. But in order to be able to change it, we can't just go, based on this picture, the tree of oppression, we can't just clip the branches away, because that's not going to have sustainable change. We really need to address what's happening, the root of the issue, and really look at the source of the problem. Another thing that we need to think about when we're talking about that, just like we were talking about how diverse our experiences are and how complex the idea of advocacy is, we need to also be able to utilize this concept of intersectionality. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more. But let me first, I'm just going to read this verbatim so that we're all on the same page, right? So to provide that definition of intersectionality. It is the way systems of inequality based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, class, and other forms of discrimination intersect to create unique dynamics and effects. So, what we're talking about is that in someone's experience, there may be multiple compounding layers of oppression that someone is experiencing. And on another form, we might have other places where, in other environments, where we actually might have power, right? So we may have privileges, but we can also have oppression. Or again, we can have multiple forms of oppression. But what we're saying is that everyone's experience and relationship to our environment is unique, and we can't solve the issues of our community by grouping everything in one with one solution under one window. Again, the process of change has to be complex in order to be sustainable. Okay, and we'll get into why this matters for youth. But I'm going to go ahead and show a video from the originator of this concept, which is who is Kimberly Crenshaw, and she explains it perfectly in this short video here. Okay, make sure my sound is good.
Intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. Intersectionality isn't so much a grand theory, it's a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. African American girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. That's probably a race and a gender problem. It's not just a race problem, it's not just a gender problem. So I encourage people to think about how the convergence of race stereotypes or gender stereotypes might actually play out in the classroom, between teachers and students, between students and other students, between students and administrators, and commit themselves to understanding that as a way of intervening and providing equal educational opportunity for all students, regardless of their identities. Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit, it is a relationship between people in history, people in communities, people in institutions. So schools do a good job when they understand that and when they commit themselves to curricular development, to opportunities in the school for all students to understand the histories that have brought us to this particular moment. You can't change outcomes without understanding how they've come about. So independent schools can take the lead on that to be responsive to their student populations and to the communities out of which the students come.
Okay, so just wanted to provide that video for some more context, and they are specifically talking about the educational space, but this is a space where we are very much so involved a lot, especially working with young people, right? And there's that intersection. But just to give a little more context, provide an example, okay? Here's a statistic, right? So almost all Black LGBTQ individuals reported that discrimination has negatively affected their psychological well-being to some degree, okay? And then on the other hand, we have 8 out of 10 white respondents report the same. So while what we see here, right, there's already a disparity taking place within the identity of having LGBTQ or the LGBTQ identity. However, that other layer of identity of experiencing the experience of being Black or African American adds another, again, compounding layer of oppression. And if we were to, again, look at that map and really sort of apply what this example, this is what it would look like, right? So there's those 3 systems that are currently taking place, right? The systems of sexism, racism, and heterosexism. And again, there's what's happening are the laws that are created around these ideologies, okay, that are impacting this individual, this specific or unique identity or unique experience. Okay, but something else I want to add, especially when we're talking about this intersectionality, is if you were to add, youth and their experience. So whatever other identities they may be having, because youth occupy many intersections, whatever experiences they may be having with oppression, right? Again, them being a younger person, that is going to be another compounding factor. And that's something to also consider when we're engaging young people in our environments. Okay. And I'll go ahead and pass the torch to provide some experience as well.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ravina Soto. I'm with the Tribal Community Coordinating Center. I am from the Enterprise Rancheria Maidu tribe just north of Sacramento, and I'm joining you today from our traditional homelands because I'm visiting my family, which is really nice. And my brother's outside making a lot of noise, so if you hear anything, I apologize for that. The Tribal Community Coordinating Center is the statewide coordinating center for the American Indian Initiative. And we develop a lot of culturally relevant tools and materials to support policy change in our communities. So we talk a lot about traditional and commercial tobacco and the differences there. And as Ignacio just explained, and as we just heard from the video, those interconnected social categorizations like race, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, they profoundly shape our identities, our perceptions, and the experiences we have with oppression. And so those factors also influence how commercial tobacco impacts every one of us and how the industry strategically targets specific populations through marketing strategies, all these different populations that we've been talking about. So for instance, menthol cigarettes have been heavily marketed towards African-American communities, leading to disproportionate harm there and higher rates of addiction. Gender plays a role in marketing, with certain tobacco products being portrayed as symbols of masculinity. Others are targeted towards this feminine identity. So those are just two other examples of how it's done, but you can see it's very prolific. In the context of understanding intersectionality, this targeted marketing has a really compound effect on individuals that come from, especially the ones that come from multiple marginalized populations. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the example of what it's done within the Native American community experience. And to talk about how tobacco has been purposefully commercialized and marketed to maximize addiction and profit and create harm in a very vulnerable population. So when we look at traditional tobacco, historically, Native Americans have had a special relationship with tobacco, and traditional tobacco, as seen on this slide, has been used by many tribal groups for thousands of years, and it has served essential roles in medicinal, social, and ceremonial practices. So it's a very respected plant, and it's meant to be used in ways that promotes well-being, and it's environmentally and personally very beneficial. So recreational tobacco use, environmental harm, those are definitely not part of Native culture. Next slide. And this slide highlights a clear distinction between traditional and commercial tobacco. Commercial tobacco is manufactured for recreational purposes. It contains toxic additives such as tar, arsenic, and formaldehyde. It's designed to be highly addictive. It's solely created for profit. So just seeing this side-by-side comparison of what traditional tobacco was and still is compared with what it was turned into as it was commercialized by the industry is very important. And then to always draw that distinction between the two, because they're really nothing alike. And when we talk about the harm and eradicating tobacco, we're really focused on commercial tobacco. Next slide. So unfortunately, commercial tobacco displaced traditional tobacco in many Native communities, and there were many factors at play that made Native Americans a very prime population to target. Colonization involved marginalization and this prohibition of Native religion and culture and the traditional practices. So for nearly a century, American Indian spiritual practices, including the use of traditional tobacco, were very aggressively suppressed by the government. Yet we had commercial tobacco emerging, and these products were made very readily available in communities, Native American communities and others. So people really turned to these products, and they did it to reconnect with themselves. Some of it was self-medicating, escaping the realities of life, and just really also trying to reconnect with their community and those spiritual practices that were being suppressed. And commercial tobacco products even made their way into ceremonial use in many communities. So the marketing tactics capitalized on the association between Native Americans and tobacco. So you can see many striking examples of cultural misappropriation on the slide. For instance, the brand American Spirit cigarettes, which is owned by R.J. Reynolds, appropriates Native symbols in its logo. It uses those words like Indian and natural in its messaging. So it really exemplifies that cultural theft, and it misleads people about the quality and the origins of the product to make it seem like it's aligned with the spiritual, healthy use. And there's nothing natural or sacred about their product. We also see images of warriors and chiefs and other product names to create an association with spirituality and wellness. So brands like Cherokee, they market their cigarettes as carrying on the Cherokee tradition. And so you can understand just by looking at this and thinking about it in the context of what people went through, how they were stripped of their cultural identity, how they could really be drawn in by these predatory marketing practices. And as traditions and practices were taken away, they had really lost a major part of who they were, and that commercial tobacco industry really strategically stepped in there and made every effort to fill that void. So the commercialization of tobacco has inflicted extensive harm, and it really becomes very evident how deliberate that harm is when we examine these strategies that were employed to target specific groups and see how marketing really leverages people's identities. So the impact is very complex, and it's varied depending on who we are. And yet it has really impacted all of us, and we all share that common thread because we have all been negatively impacted by these tactics. So with that, we'll come together. We have an activity for the group right now.
All right. And sorry, I think I went forward on one of your slides a little too early, but I went back. But yeah, so I think just to kind of go back to what Ravina was saying before we transition into our activity, we're just providing one example of disparity in how a community is specifically targeted, marketed by tobacco industry, but how we need to consider, again, all of these intersections with these unique experiences with how systems can have oppression upon a community as well. Okay, so and we're going to be diving a little deeper, but first let's take a moment to kind of come and collect together. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because this is going to be a sort of collective activity. Anyone that's comfortable, feel free to turn on your camera, but you don't need to. We have an inclusive way to do this. So we're going to be doing a simple rock, paper, scissors game. However, in the essence of a collective community organizing and whatnot, what's going to happen is everyone's going to be facing against me, right? So I'm going to be the main person that is going to be showing, my sign, rock, paper, scissors, right? And everyone else, we're going to do rock, paper, scissors, go. Everyone else is going to do your sign. And then if I beat you, then you're going to basically, if your camera's on, turn your camera off, or if your camera's already off, then you'll just continue that way. That's fine. And after that, I want everyone else that is out to turn on your mic. And then you're going to pick someone in the crowd that's still active, and you're going to be cheering them on, okay? So you're going to find someone else, and you're going to cheer them on. So if you don't want to turn on your camera, or that's not accessible to you, what you can do is plug in the chat, because we will give 3 seconds, so that's playing in times, or you can do one of the emojis on the bottom. And I think we had, it's hard for me, well, here, let me stop sharing so I can look at my actual emojis. There we go. Hello, everyone. So we'll do rock for the thumbs up, paper for the clap, and scissors, you can do the ta-da. That's kind of something that cuts or explodes. That works. Okay, is everyone good? All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. So again, we'll go rock, paper, scissors, go. And we'll start with this first round, okay? Rock, paper, scissors, go. All right, so anyone that is paper, you are out for this round. And Fadia, I saw the rock. See, thank you for using the emojis. Okay, so now anyone that was out from this round, you're going to go ahead and turn on your mic and you're going to root for someone that you know is still in. So either look for someone that's still muted or someone that their camera is on. Okay, are we ready? We're going to do the next round. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. The paper. All right, so if anyone did rock, you are out. Okay. All right. And let's go ahead. Remember, if you're out, go ahead and turn on your mic and you'll root for someone else that's still playing. All right, one more time. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. All right, anyone that scissors, you are out. Right? So we still have a good amount of people in still. All right. Thank you, Jasmine. Jasmine's cheering silently. That's all right. Appreciate you. All right. Last one. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. It's scissors. All right. Anyone that's paper, you are out. All right. How many people are left? If you can raise your hand. I see cameras on. If you can raise your hand if your camera's off. Okay. Oh, okay. So we got a couple people. All right. So here we go. A couple more rounds. Rock, paper, scissors, go. Anyone rock? Is anyone out this worm? All right, one more time. Rock, paper, scissors, go. Scissors. All right, paper, you are cut. I see you, Nancy. I see you, Amanda. All right, we're down to a couple more. That was a good run, though, Nancy. All right, rock, paper, scissors, go. On paper.
Go, people, go.
Did I get rocks? Did anyone beat me in this last round? I know I probably lost a couple times beforehand. All right, Sage, I think you're the last person left. So it's you and I. Are you ready? All right. And everyone else, if you can unmute yourself, let's root Sage on. All right.
Go, go.
Sage.
Go
Go
Sage.
Sage.
Ready?
Go, Sage.
Rock,
Go
paper,
Sage.
scissors, go. Oh, no. I was rooting for you too, but that's okay. Okay. All right, so that was a fun activity. We'll go and transition. I think everyone is done or out. And thank you for those that were doing that last cheering. I know it was getting tense towards the end. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and transition back into our presentation. All right. All right, now I'll pass the torch to Kale.
Okay, so for this activity, rock, paper, scissors, cheer. I created it when I was teaching at Cal State Fullerton. And for the purpose of it is to show that even though we're all here and trying to achieve the same goal, we can celebrate one another and everybody's successes. So the reason why we're here is to advocate for youth and to work with youth. So that's our main goal. If someone from another organization is doing something and you're just like, oh, I wish I could do that, then just ask them. Just be like, hey, I saw this. This was awesome. Like, how can we collaborate? Like, and go from there. And just know that even though regardless of what we're doing, what we're working on and everything, we're all here with the same intention and with the same goal in mind, is to work with youth, collaborate on better ways to like communicate and just provide a safe space for youth, right? So even though we're all from different organizations, we have different things going on, it's really nice to just take like a step back and see the bigger picture. to know that we're not only here for the youth, but we're also here together to help those youth.
Thank you, Kale. And really want to express to that idea of really creating that kind of space and that sense of collaboration with our youth partners, right? And of course, we'll get into this more in the next session when we're talking about sort of power dynamics. But especially if you're working in a group, there are going to be, or there should be, flexible power dynamics where we're making space for youth to have power and space for us to step back and cheer on our youth partners as they take lead in these activities, right? So that's really the goal. And the reason why, and something that we really need to understand and acknowledge, is the history of oppression when we're talking about how society has treated young people for many, many years. Even if we were to, I'm not going to go through all the details here, but if we were to look at the beginning of looking at the perception that young people were not, really, they weren't civilized, they weren't capable, and they weren't suitable for society until they were basically reared or went through sort of military or some sort of training. Then they were suitable members of society. But then we also see other parts where in history, especially after the child labor laws that were passed to protect youth, it almost had this sort of 180 flip to where suddenly youth were overprotected and then they weren't seen as having any form of agency. And it was important to keep them safe, to not pit them in any path of harm, but to a very toxic level, right? To where it wasn't allowing youth to have that space for agency, for being able to take part in decision making throughout those early years of development. And then another part that we see within history and some inconsistencies with youth power, right? The way we treat youth and how we treat other people, especially during World War II when there was a draft of young people. So young people were being drafted and expected to serve their country and expected to die for their country. Yet they, again, were not old enough to vote and make changes for their community. Okay. So even to this point now, we do have like the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is something that is constantly being developed by the United Nations. However, if we look at, again, like the US has not really signed this agreement and has not really participated in that further development. And even though we do have a lot of advancements, we have positive youth development, which we see as a concept within our educational system, and that is progress. However, there is still more to do, especially when we're talking about creating spaces where youth authentically have the capacity to and the space to lead change in their communities and be able to make decisions and change their environment, and where communities have that, again, practice and lens of viewing youth not as the issue but as the solution. Okay. Just to go over some other examples, especially when we're talking about those inconsistencies and the differences of how adults are treated compared to how youth are treated. Especially we can see in our environments, sometimes in our school environments, sometimes in our even personal like home environments, how youth, they may have the same action that an adult has. However, they will face, or they oftentimes face, harsher punishment that can come in forms of being embarrassed, right? Can be to where their property is confiscated against their consent. And the issue with all of this is that it is normalized and looked at as acceptable behavior that that adults can act upon towards youth. Okay. And then there's also this whole idea of young people being incarcerated, and a lot of times through minor offenses. So just because they are under the age of 18, there are more laws that put them into the pathway of the justice system, right? So that, again, is an inequity among young people and the youth identity. Okay. The last bit, and this is a very big one, is a lot of the rules that we create. And I would love to, do a deeper dive where the difference between like rules and agreements, because rules are arbitrary. Rules are created from the adult lens and put upon people, again, a lot of times without their consent. So a lot of those rules are created from the adult lens, adult perspective, and even the way that we perceive youth behavior and youth culture. Okay, so a lot of times, for example, I have right here where a young person that does not agree with an adult, okay, and shows indifference and starts to disengage because they notice that my voice is not being taken into consideration, and what they are saying is harmful to my body, to my person. Okay, but then that is disrespect, that's moodiness. But then an adult having that agency and being able to talk against someone else that is, again, harming them through their actions, their interactions, their relationship. Okay, that is understood. And okay, I understand where you're coming from. You're putting up boundaries. See, that's an inconsistency and an inequity. Okay. All right. And, there are countless ways and phrases that we normalize on a regular basis that really go hand in hand with this oppression of young people and this view of young people. Okay. And I would love for you all, you can annotate, you can put it in the chat. If there is a saying that you've heard yourself, I would love it if you could, dot it, make a mark or something like that to say, yes, I have heard this. Sometimes like this might be something that I've actually said. Okay. And that's okay, because right now we're at that space of acknowledging some of the ways that we treat young people. Oh, Adam, thank you. Oh my God, you're such a baby, right? Okay. And what especially I can see with that, you're such a baby, kind of saying someone expressing their emotion or that they have an issue with something or trying to state where their state of mind is, which is a very good thing to do, especially in the process of communication. But right, that saying of you're such a baby for expressing how you feel. I see, yeah, you will understand when you are older, as if young people don't have the capacity to comprehend their experiences and the way that they see the world. Yep, as long as you are in my house, I see you're so smart for your age. I see a lot. And that, so then what is that saying? Right? That young people can't be intelligent, that they can't, uh, have some process of logic to figure things out, and act also, you're acting childish. Thank you, Kale. You're being over dramatic, especially an adult, again, expressing to a young person. Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. I'll go ahead and move forward. Oh yeah, let me clear the annotation real quick. All right. So all of this form of oppression towards young people, I want to put this definition into your mind if you haven't heard it before. This is an ism, and to call it out specifically, it is adultism. Okay. So again, I'm just going to read this verbatim, so we're on the same page. So let's read that definition of adultism. So they are the behaviors and attitudes based on the assumption that adults are better than young people and entitled to act upon young people without their consent. Now, last bit is this form of mistreatment is reinforced. Again, we were talking about this earlier, by social institutions, our laws, our customs, and our attitudes. Okay, so this is something that really has this explosive impact where we have the laws that really allow it to happen, that sustain it, this form of behavior towards young people. And we see that again through a lot of those histories that I was talking about, the history of youth oppression. So, when we're talking about everything that we did in the beginning, I know it might have been like, oh, we're going off on a tangent. This is a lot of information. When are we going to talk about young people? When are we going to talk about youth? The point that I'm trying to get across, and I want you all to understand, is that all of that understanding of oppression and intersectionality applies very definitely, especially when we're talking about young people, because again, they occupy the many intersections that we have mentioned. Okay. The other thing that we need to understand, and I already said this too, right? Youth are not the issue. They are critical partners. They are part of the solution. Okay, and that whole idea again of change being complex and how we need to work with the community that's being impacted, that applies for young people as well. In order for us to be able to find solutions for the way that young people are treated and the experiences that they have and the vision that they have for the future and the environment that they're living in, we need to connect with them. We need to ask them, what do you see? What matters to you? The other bit, the reason why we're talking about all of this is because what we're really trying to get at and trying to promote and advocate for are restorative practices. Okay, so especially when we're talking about the way that our society treats young people, what that does is create a lot of mistrust, and that mistrust will continue sometimes for generations and generations. In order to move forward and create this positive change, community connectedness, collective power, we really need to start at that relationship level, and we need to work in spaces to where we can build that trust and restore that trust. Okay, and the last bit, and this is very important, we're talking about all of these other types of oppression, all of these isms. One ism is going to support another ism. They're all connected and oftentimes follow the same pattern. So when we are dismantling the power dynamics that are existing and the hierarchies that are existing between adults and youth, and we are really liberating young people, we are also liberating ourselves. Okay? Not only because we are including young people in the solutions and sustainable futures, right? But we are also unworking a lot of the traumas that we experience as young people, okay? So it's all connected. And that's why we really want to have that strong beginning and a strong start with that discussion. Okay, the other thing I want to give this visual, right? Us as individuals, where we are working. So by providing this information, what we are trying to do is really encourage these values, these beliefs, this form of behavior that we're talking about of dismantling adultism. But we also operate within that structural environment, right? So we are part of the system. We are part of the environment, especially working with young people to create community change and the rules that we operate within, as well as agencies, as organizations. So it's important that we have this practice, okay, so that we can continue to model and also advocate for this type of social change that we're talking about with how we engage with young people. Okay, so other than that, when I was talking about going beyond just positive youth development, we do need to go beyond that, and we need to educate young people about these power dynamics that we're talking about today, about intersectionality, about oppression, because when we make them more aware of these systems and how their identity is in relationship to all of these power dynamics, okay, we are building their capacity to act by building their awareness of their selves. Okay, so then they can begin to ask, well, how does that impact my community? How does that impact my family? How does that impact my friends? All right, and what are the things that I want to change in this environment now that I'm aware and I see where the source of this experience that I've been feeling is coming from, right? And then also on that global sense, and really doing a big, having a lens, a big picture, when we are educating them on this and we are engaging with youth around these topics, what we are also doing is having them become aware of those, again, patterns of oppression, small and large across the globe, from one instance to the next. Okay, and that's when we are working in that space, this is what we're doing. We're doing social justice youth development. And just to summarize real quick, it's really important, especially when we're talking about those inconsistencies of how different communities are treated, how young people are treated. It's important to have young people realize that, again, so that they can act upon it and they can change their environment with that language and that understanding as a tool to use. Okay, beyond that, everything that I've said of why we are here, the biggest part, just like how I say in the beginning, when we are working with youth, why we do advocacy in this space, in our roles, when we're working with youth, why are youth big, like crucial partners? It is because in order to have sustainable change, again, we do need youth to be there. We need their perspectives, their stories, the ways that they are impacted, especially within tobacco protection or prevention within that space. There's so much as an adult that or as adults we do not see because we are not young people in their environments, in their schools. When we hear how they're experiencing, vaping within their bathrooms, how they are experiencing at the same time, though they are seeing something that's impacting them, how sometimes there are limitations in schools, and again, where they don't have the power to make change because of that perception of young people. So we need to hear that. We need to collect that information from them so that we can, again, really elevate their stories in that middle section to really reflect the data, because data is important. Data is wonderful. However, data does not give all of the context. So we do need youth to be able to share the stories as well. And we, in our role as agencies and organizations, we can elevate their stories, share their stories on a broader sense to broader communities. And last bit, we also need youth to be in the space, right? Especially when we're talking about doing that activism, being present. Because when youth are present and when they are taking part, not only is it impacting our communities to where communities are seeing this and they also are taking action, but it is impacting them and their self-worth, and it is also impacting that behavior for them for the future, for them to take these skills and be able to apply them in a long-term sense, again, in a sustainable sense. Okay. But, and I won't go too into this, but, something I also like to advocate for or about is that youth have been leading social justice movements. They've been leading social action for many, many years. Okay. If you look, it's easy to find this information. It is not educated to young people a lot of times. You look at social movements, they're always looking at an adult as a social leader. However, most of those instances, many of those instances, they were partnering with young people in that space as well, or youth were leading the vision and informing the adults as well. So they were part of that process. And here's a whole list of some instances, especially if we were to look at some recent instances with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, how youth have really been taking charge in that process and in that movement. And then a recent example too, which was from like Hoopa Valley High School, where it started with one Native youth, but they came together, a whole coalition of youth, 50 youth from the high school in that area, that chose to say, we want to make a difference and really protect our sacred waters. So they began to create education for the community. They began to inform curriculum, or they did create curriculum that did impact policies throughout the state as well, and is also growing with that awareness. Okay. So just want to kind of provide this because, if we want to look at case studies, they're there. Right. But even if we look specifically within our work with tobacco prevention, we could not have been successful without the work of youth and their involvement with the flavor ban, right? Because we could not rely on the state to pass this, especially with tobacco industry intervention. So we had to rely on, again, the community and youth being able to really collect that data about what it looked like, how they were being impacted by flavors, because they were very much so having unequal impacts that were affecting young people, and they were being marketed through flavors by the tobacco industry. Okay, but through their involvement, we were able to have a full flavor ban throughout the state. Because of their involvement, we were able to have pressure on decision makers, and the state and our government was hearing they were hearing their voices. Okay. But something that I really want to express, and we're going to be talking about this throughout the rest of this webinar, we cannot do this change with young people without creating those spaces, without, again, building those spaces of trust and belonging, okay, and having these youth engagement practices that we're talking about, okay, so authentic youth engagement practices. Okay, and I'll go ahead and pass the torch on to Ravina.
Thank you. Yeah, so we talked about adultism and other forms of oppression and some of those practices that we really want to avoid because they break down trust. And now we're talking about safe spaces because as adult allies, we can really show up strongly here and play a vital role in the creation of those safe spaces for our youth. And it really applies to all of us, people of all ages. But since we're talking about youth really face an array of unique challenges. They have academic pressures, those social expectations, there's conflict with friends and family, unfortunately, bullying, discrimination. Those are just things that come along with life for all of us. And it's really hard when you're at that young age to handle all of those coming from so many different directions. So it's really paramount that we as adults step up as allies and support them as they build competencies to navigate all these adverse situations that inevitably come to all of us throughout life. So that ability to develop and practice skills that will help navigate all of those challenges that come along and really build resilience, it can really hinge on the environments that we create for them. So those safe spaces are not just physical locations, they are emotional and psychological sanctuaries where young people can come together and find acceptance and encouragement, where confidentiality is honored, where we reserve judgment. So these spaces provide young people, all people, an opportunity to express their thoughts, their concerns, without any fear of people judging and without any fear of that it's going to be carried outside of the group and used against them. So in safe environments, we can all explore identities, we can explore issues that are important to us. Young people can learn from their mistakes, hopefully grow into confident individuals. It's within these safe spaces that those resilient factors are nurtured. So that's where adult allies come in, really crucial to establishing that safety and trust and ensuring that the community agreements, that everyone has buy-in there, that it's all respected and maintained within the group. And in addition to that, adult allies can really serve as role models by demonstrating empathy and respect and kindness and really setting standards for how young people should treat others by the way we engage with others and by the way we engage with them. So treating them the way we would like them to treat us and the way we would like them to treat other people moving forward. And really being mindful to model positive behaviors in addition to just talking about them. And that really builds an additional level of safety. Next slide. So some of those essential factors for cultivating a resilient mindset that we can build into those safe spaces can be intentionally practiced in these safe communal gatherings that we create. And that's regardless of the purpose of coming together, whatever we're doing, our event for the day, we can really build those practices into the safe spaces that we create. So we can develop those strong social networks of support just by coming together, just by increasing the number of interactions that we have where we have maintained that trust and safety. And that just creates a bigger group, a larger network of reliable people that youth can turn to. So developing strong networks of support is extremely important. And that's just something that we do in all of our practices when we are consistent. We also practice techniques for emotional awareness, self-regulation that can be built into all of our activities as well. We can talk about stress, how we cope with it. We as adults can be honest and open in our conversations about harmful coping mechanisms, and talking about how we have our experiences with stress and how we cope, and then just building that increased awareness and constantly practicing so we can replace those harmful coping skills with healthier ones. Safe spaces are also important to work on developing good problem-solving skills. It's a safe place to practice. It allows young people to think about how they will respond when they're out in the real world, when they're confronted with a stressful situation. So that just sets them up in preparation. And all of this can be built into our activities by the way we respectfully engage and create that trust and safety. Next one. Adult allies are also extremely important because young people need those adults who believe in them and have very high expectations for their success. They will live up to our expectations. Here we can review those essential building blocks of success and think about those opportunities that we have to develop those skills through our interactions. These 7 C's of resilience, this is adopted from the International Youth Foundation's Positive Youth Development Movement, and they're all listed out here, and we will share that resources with you as well. So we have competence. That is when we create those opportunities for young people to develop those important skills so that they can feel valued for their contributions. We help develop competency by acknowledging their strengths and speaking up. And when we see them making progress or contributing, we say it. And we also give them space to contribute in their own ways and to take lead. Confidence is really part of building competency. It's knowing it's okay to make your mistakes. It's having that confidence to recover from challenges. As adults, instead of criticizing or focusing on the negative outcome, we can really applaud the effort and the bravery that it takes to put yourself out there, and then just focus on the lessons learned and how that can serve people moving forward. Connection is having that connection with other people, that strong network of support we already talked about, creates a sense of security and well-being, and just that we're social creatures and that community makes us stronger. Character is modeling and creating integrity and having a sense of right and wrong. And that's something that we can talk about and we can practice, and perspective taking, building empathy. That's all really important to being a resilient, strong person. Contribution is when young people contribute to the well-being of others. They should be appreciated for that. So we definitely want to acknowledge it. It should be a positive and gratifying experience that makes someone feel valued when they make contributions to others. Coping is really when we work on developing those healthy coping strategies that we already talked about a little bit, and through just discussion and practice and awareness, young people will be less likely to turn to dangerous alternatives when they're in that moment and they're confronted with stress. Control is young people should be trusted to make decisions that impact their well-being, not feeling powerless in their lives, similar to what Ignacio already discussed. And that is the last C. So I think we're going into breakout rooms to talk about some of these topics.
Yes. I just want to, I'll put in the questions into the chat, but we're going to take a moment to really, I guess, digest a lot of this information that we provided today. So the first and main thing I really want everyone to do within your breakout room is to share your reflection on where some of the concepts that we've talked about today have shown up in your own lives, right? Because again, we are trying to build empathy. We're trying to build understanding of the experiences that youth go through. And sometimes we compartmentalize adults and youth, but we still have our experiences as young people in us. Our youth is still a part of us, okay? So we can't separate those two. So we need to get back into that space of empathizing and understanding the youth space and youth experience. The second question is, has your perception and definition of advocacy changed after this reflection and after this training? Okay, so I'll go ahead and plug that into the chat. And we're going to take a good, I think we'll have about 3 to 4 people in each room. We'll let you all speak for about 15 minutes. We're going to come back. So I think actually about 13 minutes. We're going to come back by 11:20 so that we can, again, really just have that big communal discussion around the topics. Okay. Does everyone have the chat question? Everyone good? Okay. All right. And Kale, we are good to go.
A lot of our office is dressed up. I was bah humbug. I didn't dress up,
Yes.
but there's lots of fun people to see. We have the Adams family going on here. So
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah, it's pretty cute.
Yeah, we were very adamant, even in developing. Like it's gonna be on Halloween. We're gonna dress up. So I'm glad there to hear that there's other people in costumes too out there. All
There
right.
are.
Yeah.
There are.
They are.
Okay, so I have the recording back on. Hopefully you all got to have some good conversation, to really have some reflection, some time to really like decompress and process some of this information, and really like look at how it applies to you and the youth you're working with as well. So yeah, just want to take a moment to synergize all of the takeaways. So what were some things that came up? What were some things that really either like had an emotional impact, or maybe I guess a strong reflection period for you? I'd love to hear if anyone would like to share some of their takeaways from the discussions that you had.
Well, since nobody else is talking, I our group it was only Charlie and I, but we had a great discussion about what's going on in our communities, and we discussed some of the examples of adultism. You know, the situations where they ignore or they, dismiss the young people, and I have plenty of those examples. So. And then we catch up on what's going on in her community and what's going on mine.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. So then hearing too how you're saying that in your environment too, you see many examples of adultism taking place. And as you said, very strong connection to some of the examples that we gave. Still, right, still continuing. Okay. And with anyone else, does anyone have any other takeaways? And feel free to, you can plug it into the chat as well.
I mean, for the most part, it was just two of us in group one, and we're kind of just talking about intersectionality, and we're kind of sharing our different approaches to like what we're specifically doing, and we found some similarities in regards to we kind of want to recruit more youth, and kind of have that type of engagement. So that's kind of just what we were discussing.
Thank you. Okay. And I love that kind of both of you talking about your unique experiences, but then there was a collective sort of value that you both had, and really goal of like youth recruitment, building the work that you're trying to do with young people, and really expand that that space. Thank you, Juan. All right. Any other takeaways? Anything else that sort of stood out through this training or through your conversation?
My group was talking about, we're kind of balancing grant requirements with creating that safe space. And so I think, especially with my personal team in my office, there's some frustration and lack of patience, I guess, just because like we're not moving fast enough. But to be able to create that space where you feel confident enough to express themselves and to get involved takes a long time. And so especially, sometimes we're competing against a decade plus of them being told that their opinion doesn't matter. And so there is always those grant requirements, but also I think we as a group that are trying to work with you just need to be patient and focus on the building blocks and the foundation first.
Yeah. Thank you, Ritter. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because that's very important. Where you're saying focusing on those building blocks and the really that relationship base of really working with your youth in their space. But then that's something to think about too, just like we have been talking about, sort of that lens and perspective of how successful, how fast youth coalitions should be moving. And again, that's a perfect example of those systems through our agency, through the funding grantors, and how they are setting these rules for youth, again, when they're not being involved in that discussion a lot of times about what works for them and what they see as being within their capacity at this moment in time. Okay. And we have time for one more. If there's one more person that wants to speak out or to share anything that they were impacted by throughout this training, again, would love to hear it. No pressure. Okay. So before we move forward with our last slide, something I really want to put out there too. Again, like really the main purpose of this first session was really to understand a little bit about the youth perspective, the youth experience, and to just really have that understanding and acknowledgement of how important youth are in this process, especially when we're creating community change, and how really like they are crucial partners in that process. Okay, but throughout these next two sessions that we have within the webinar, we're going to be talking a little more about those power dynamics, having a little deeper dive into that and how we work to dismantle those power dynamics within our spaces. And also, we'll also have a session that's really talking about how to create those safe spaces with young people. How do we be able to get them to feel like more comfortable, right? Or create that space to where young people are ready to speak out more, are ready to take action. Because again, that is always needed to be the center of our process, that relationship building. Without that, you're not going to have a successful or sustainable coalition. And without that, it is not going to be youth-centered. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close out. I will pass the torch to Kale, and we want to leave you with this last bit.
So this is a quote from Crip Kinship, which is a book that you can find on Amazon and other places by, I don't want to butcher the name, but I believe it's Shada Cafe. And this is from her book. You are not too sick, too disabled, too sad, too crazy, too ugly, too fat, or too weird. We live in a white supremacist, patriarchal, ableist culture that values oppressive standards for the sake of centralizing power and making profit. Our ostracism is a result of the system that demonizes difference and not a reflection of your worth, value, ability to be loved, etc. You are not the problem. You are perfect. So
Thank you, Kale. Okay, I think yeah, we just wanted to leave you with this. Kale, were you going to add anything else at all?
Just thank you all for being here. Thank you all for contributing like your time to being a part of this webinar with all of us. And you know, just thank you to everyone. Thank you to all of the co-hosts and hosts and everything. You all are spectacular, and I genuinely am grateful and thankful for all of you. And because this is a part of, you know, why we're here and being proactive and allowing that space for youth to be a part of this too.
And with that, this ends our first session. Please come back for more. Come back to this community. Let's continue to grow and learn together, and really normalize this this process and this approach with engaging young people in an authentic manner. Have a good day. Happy Halloween. Later, everybody.
Happy Halloween. Safe trick-or-treating.
Thank you. Happy Halloween.
Bye. I think I'll go ahead and stop recording.